So, however, thank you. So, however, it is to be seen that there is the important things is the symptoms. The symptoms is very peculiar of the Lac Can is that the symptoms is mostly erratic. Usually the symptoms does not remain in one place. They are also ever changing from one place to another, and then there are the erratic changes. That is the like, and there is the pain which are constantly changing, flying from one part to another, and Kalibai and pulsatility is also there from one part to another. Kalibai is also there, changing from side to side is also another symptoms. Every few hours of the days, that is also another characteristic symptoms of these drugs. Sometimes there is erratic changes erratic, symptoms are erratic, एक जगह में फिक्स नहीं है. The pains constantly flying from one plus part. ठीक है, हमारे पास और मेडिसिन है. Kalibai is also another medicine. Pulsatility is also another medicine. Lac Can is also another medicine. Another is the agaricus is also there. One part to another. Lipodem also changing. Lacus is also changing from one part to another. Even the phytolacc is also one of the medicine. Electric pen and changing from side to side. Even every few hours to days. एवं ये भी एक जगह से दूसरा जगह में वो चेंज करते हैं. कोराइजा with discharge of the thick कोराइजा कैसे discharge of the thick white mucus, one nostril stopped off, another nostrils they are become the free. So this type of changeability also one of the very characteristics of these drugs. So one nose is blocked, another is open, and simultaneously nose becomes blocked and open and is to be found it. That is the discharging, this type of change conditions are alternate. That is the everything is changing and alternate conditions. Discharge become the very acrid discharges of coraija. Nose lips are become the raw, aram, ilium sipa, and arsenic is also there. So coraija with discharge of the thick white mucus, and the nostrils have become the stuffed, and one another, they are from one part to another free and discharging. The conditions are becomes alternate. Discharge become the acrid. Nose and lips raw. Aram mule is there. Ilium sipa is also there. The diphtheria and tonsillitis is also very important factor of the drugs, especially in case of the diphtheria that are also changing from one part to another. The tonsillitis conditions are also changing from one part to another, from right to left or left to right, like this. This type of erratic changes are very predominant symptoms of the Lac Can and pulsatility and some other. But the Lac Can patient is totally different. The mental symptoms is different, and on the basis of the mental symptoms, we are mostly we can prescribe the medicines. Okay. Even from side to day, there is the sore throat, there is the cough and apt to begin to end. Throat is sore throat, cough apt to begin to end with menstruation. So mostly क्या देखा गया है, throat को साथ menstruation discharge, menstruation complaint is very important. Yellowish or white patches, pain shoots to the ear and also there. So throat problem with the ear pain and menstruation problem and also shoot to ear is also there. Throat is very sensitive to touch externally. The throat is become very sensitive to touch externally. Lacusis also. In case of the lacusis, there is the peculiar symptoms are there. Throat is very sensitive to touch. Aggravation by empty swallowing. Ignition is also there. Throat is very sensitive to touch. Aggravation by empty swallowing. Ignition also there. Constant inclination to swallow. There is a painful, almost impossible. So sore throat painful condition, in almost impossible while deglutition. So it is very important. Mercury is also there, salivation is also there, pains extend to ear. Hypersulfur is also important, cardiovicum is also there. So hypersulfur, cardiovicum, these are the medicine where the pains begins from the throat to ear and so on. Begins to the left side, lacush is also there. Left-sided problem is also very important symptoms of the drugs. Lacush. There is like we see the throat becomes usually very shiny, very glazed appearance, and diphtheric patches are there, deposit are there, chancres are there, and ulcers are there. So the chancres are yellow discoloration, shining, and there is any glazed appearance, throat is reddish, and so on. Menses too early, too profuse, the flow is in gases, bright red, viscid and stringy, dark blood, stringy, that is the crocus sativus. Breast swollen and painful, sensitive before and during the menses, mentioned the conium. So if we see the menses, there are so many characteristic symptoms are there and we can identify it. The menses are too early, too profuse, flowing, gussish, bright red and viscid and stringy, dark and black stringy, that is the crocus. Breast swollen, painful, very sensitive before and during menses is like this, that is the cona maculatum. Okay, so the menses are very important. Sometimes they are stringy, black, dark, crocus behave, but in case of the crocus sativa, there is some mental symptoms behave. Chalo. Discharges of flutters from the vagina. This is also another symptoms of the drugs. We can think it bromium, lycopodium, nux vomica, and sanguinaria. So, if there is any, I mean that is the discharges from flutter, that is called the physometra. In case of the physometra, bromium, lycopodium, nux vomica, and sanguinary is there. Breast becomes inflamed, painful, aggravation by least jar and towards evening. Breast inflamed and painful, aggravation by least jar and towards the evening. Must hold them firmly when going up or downstairs. Brachial by is also there. So in case of that, there is aggravation while movement, while changing posture, while motion, and while jerking. The brachial burn is there, and this medicine also there. The loss of milk while nursing, without any known cause is very important. So this is very important. The Lac Can, like in case of the Lac Can, loss of the nursing, loss of the milk during the nursing children, nursing mother, it is very important. Even sometimes another medicine is asafoetida is there, where there is a nursing mother girl milk is not secreting. We can think of the drug. Asparagus botrytic medicine, asparagus, that is also useful remedy in case of the there is loss of the milk, usually the nursing mother. Apart from this, sometimes other food and drinks are also to be added along with the medicine. So in case of that, there is serviceable in almost all cases. When it is required to dry up the milk, we can think of the Lac Can. So in almost all cases, when required to dry up the milk, so that time it is very important. Asafoetida is also important to bring back, to increase it, and lac diflotam is also there. So this is also one of the very important medicine regarding the milk in the breast or in case of the dry up and so on. They are the very hungry, cannot eat enough. Persons are very hungry, cannot eat enough to satisfy, as hungry after eating as before. It is very important on these conditions. So very hungry, cannot eat enough to satisfy, and as hungry after eating as before. So this is also another Calcutta, Sina and Lycopodium also there. Very hungry, cannot eat enough to satisfy, as hungry after eating as before. इसलिए ये लोगों का कभी कभी देखा गया है ना, हंग्री है, खाना खाते हैं कि लेकिन सेटिस्फाई नहीं होते. कभी कभी देखा थोड़ा खाना खाया फिर इजीली सेटिस्फाइड होते हैं. This type of symptoms also present in these drugs. Sinking of epigastrium, fainting in stomach. Epigastrium sinking, fainting in the stomach is also another symptom. Sensation as if breath would leave her when lying down. Sensation as if breath would leave her when lying down. कभी कभी ऐसे लगते हैं जब भी सो जाते हैं तो उसको रेस्पिरेशन ये सांस बंद हो जाएंगे. Must get up and walk about. इसलिए जब भी सो जाते हैं उसको लगता है ऐसे suffocation होने वाला है. The patient has to wake up. बाद में क्या देखते हैं? Usually suffocation, नाक बंद होना, कभी कभी नाक से discharge होना. Ammonium carbonate is also very important medication. Even alternately नाक block होना. Lacis is also there. Greendelia robusta is also there. Okay, and but Greendelia robusta is also very important medicine because of the heart problem also there. Lacis is also there. The fluttering of the heart. There is the next number. Palpitation, violent when lying on the left side. So in case of the palpitation, the violent become violent when lying on the left side is very characteristic symptoms of the drug. That's why this Lac Can patient, Lacis patient, they cannot lie on the left side. And there is aggravation. Ammunition by turning to the right is also tabacam. So to removing the condition, the turning to the right is also tabacam is also there. The sexual organs easily becomes excited to touch. So this type of symptoms also present. That is the nymphomania. We have the medicine Platina, Murex, Lilium-T, and these are the drugs are there. And excited from touch, excited from the pressure on sitting or friction by walking. So sexual organs is excited by from touch, pressure on sitting or friction by walking. China, coffee, muriatic acid, and the platina. So you say on friction by walking is very important symptom. Sexual organ excited. Cinnamon, coffee, muriatic acid, murex, and platina. But that the differentiating point is there from where we can distinguish from one medicine to another. These are very characteristics. What will find it now? There is a very symptoms of the coffee is different. Coffee is a mostly painful remedy. China is also time modalities is also there. Muriatic acid is also very often sickness. These are the murex also excessive sexual excitability is there, and platinum also with having some egos. When walking, seems to be walking on the ear. When walking, seems to be walking on the ear. These are very important symptoms of the drugs. When lying, does not seem to touch the bed. When walking, seems to be walking in the ear. ऐसा लग रहा how में घूम रहे हैं. When lying, does not seem to touch the bed. जब सोते does not seem to touch the bed, as if they are floating in the air. असराम बोल के इंग्लिश है, उसमें भी है. So when talking seems to be walking on the air, and when lying does not seem to touch the bed, asaram is also there. Backache, intense backache is there. Unbearable backache is there. Across the sacral region also there. extending to the right natrice and right sciatic nerve. So this unbearable backache across the sacral region, extending to right to left or right sciatic nerve, aggravation by rest and on first movement is also very important. So in case of the backache, we must consider Rastach, calcular floor, isculacivocastinum, like this does. Among this medication also, even ruta is also there. Spinex from base of the brain of coccyx. There is the pain on base of the brain from coccyx, very sensitive to touch on pressure. The spine is very sensitive to touch on pressure. China sulf is very important. Phosphorus and zinc also important. So phosphorus, sulfur, zinc, these are very sensitive to backache, as also the sensitiveness to the spinal organs here there. Next number, if we see the aggravation of the drugs, the particular aggravation, especially cold aggravation, the affects the mouth, pain in shoulder, pain in the knees and ankles, and herpetic eruptions. Shoulder, mouth, nose, every hair aggravation, but along with the herpetic eruption is also there. Heat aggravation, pain in ankles, and headache. Heat aggravation, soreness of the joint. Cold aggravation, pain in upper knees and head is also there. So these are very important. But so it is very important of this cases. Next, in case of the throat problem, what will find it? The Lac Can II patient may suffer from diphtheria or tonsillitis, whatever may be the conditions. In diphtheria, the patient becomes the membranous diphtheria. The membranous leaves one side and goes to the other side. Is very important factor of this drugs. Sure, in case of the diphtheria, from one side to the another, and there is a sensation as if there is a lump in the throat with constant desire to swallow. Lump in the throat, constant desire to swallow. Pain shifts from one side to another side. In spite of this difficulty, he feels like swallowing at the time, all the time. The breath smells horribly. The throat is shining, glazing appearance of the diphtheria deposits. So we'll find it. If there is this type of symptoms, the throat becomes glazy and deposits is there, yellow and white patches are there. Throat is much sensitive to touch and do not allow, they are very internally and externally. Pain is of shifting nature and constantly flying from one part to another. Pain shifting from one part to another and changing from side to side every few hours of the day is very important. His pain extends to year or shoots to year. Pain extends to year or shoots to years. 1 year, 2 year, another year is very important. His pain is relieved by cold drinks. This is also important of the drugs. Pain is relieved by cold drinks. So actually, all pain usually mostly relieved by hot, but the Lac Can patient pain usually throat pain relieved by cold drinks. Next is the rheumatism. In case of the Lac Can patient is affected by rheumatic pain in extremities and back, especially on the left side. So, affect the rheumatic pain extends to the extremities and back, especially on the left side. Patient feels pain in left limb and is beaten. The patient feels pain as if the limbs are beaten with rheumatic swelling of the joints. His pain is of flying nature, changing from side to side, which is aggravated from motion and heat and ablation by the cold. So this is very characteristic symptoms of the rheumatic. Some symptoms are also to some extent looks like that of the Rastach. Okay. So if patient feels pain in the limbs as if beaten, with rheumatic swelling of the joints. His pain is offline, is nature changing from side to side, which is aggravated from motion and heat and evolution by the cold. This is very characteristic symptoms of the drugs. So we must consider these things: what is happening, what is going on, and so on. And during prescription, all the criteria should be considered. Next number, it is in the breast affections. The patient may suffer from inflammation of the breast. There are so many drugs are there: Brownia, Phosphorus, Pulsatilla, Conamacroton, Lac Can, okay, even the Thuja, Caltraflor. So many drugs are there. Cinabirish, and Calciracarb, and so on. So patient may suffer from inflammation of breast, aggravated from least jar and movement. So the whole seat while moving to prevent the jar, even Brownie is also there. The patient has to support the breast, and the patient feels as if they would support. इसलिए patient का क्या होते हैं? Usually support the breast. Her breast is painful and swollen before and during the menses. This is very important symptoms of the this Lac Can, Conamaculatum, okay, Markeri group में भी है, Italaca में भी है, Calciracarb में भी है. So the breast symptoms are very painful and swollen before and during menses. It is very important. There is also loss of milk while nursing without any known cause. Nursing without any known cause. Next number, in menses, her menses are too early. Menses are too early, too profuse, flow in gushes out. Gushes are bright red. Menses are too early, too profuse, and flows are in gushes of bright red, very viscid and stringy blood. During menses, there is severe pain in the abdomen, and during the abdomen on the left side, which fly from side to side. Her menstruation travel is relieved by appearance of the flow, like the lachesis, like the Ginkgo metallica. All complaints relieved by appearance of the natural discharges or menses, like this. So, in case of the Ginkgo, we will find it. There is peculiar symptoms. The peculiar symptoms is all complaints, aggravation before menses, and complaints which are relieved by the natural discharges. Her sore throat begins and the end with menstruation. This is also another very peculiar condition of the patient. The horse begins, throat symptoms begins and ends with the menstruation. So, menstruation is related, throat symptoms. Her breast is painful and sensitive and swollen before and during menstruations. Okay, these are very uncommon, peculiar characteristic symptoms of the drugs. So, in case of the Lac Can, the throat symptoms and the breast symptoms are very associated symptoms. Before and during menses, this is also very important symptoms of the drugs. Okay, इसलिए menses के टाइम अगर किसी को तकलीफ है, before, during and after, menses का कैरेक्टर भी है अलग अलग है. During menses, before menses, after menses. Even sometimes there may be some pimples are appearing, other complications appearing before menses, during menses, and after menses. We can think of these drugs, the Lac Can. But in case of the Lac Can, lachesis, Ginkgo, like this. But the characteristic symptoms should be followed. Characteristic in what sense? There is very uncommon peculiar symptoms is that when they usually characteristic they will follow how it is. The swollen before menses, the breast becomes swollen before menses. Their throat problem usually before menses. So these are very important symptoms of the drugs and must consider it. Okay. So this is very typical characteristics of the